You are Locked On Ole Miss, your daily podcast on the Ole Miss Rebels. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Thanks for making the Locked On Ole Miss podcast your first listen every day. We're free and available wherever you get your podcast, including YouTube. We're part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every single day. Hello, I'm Stephen Willis from the Locked On Ole Miss podcast, and I'm joined like I am most every week by Josh Guest. And we're going to talk about a variety of Ole Miss topics and what's going on around town, stuff like that as well. And we'll do the top 5 greatest Ole Miss football wins per Josh Guest when we come back from the break. But we're going to start out with this. I think it was Brett McMurtry put out a tweet. They released times of whenever all the kickoffs were. But the Ole Miss Wake Forest game, that kickoff time was released. And it's being 6:30 Eastern. That makes sense. That's fine. I'm happy with that. But it's on the CW. And I've been making jokes pretty much all Thursday morning about CW shows and Arrow and The Flash. I think he even did an Dawson's Creek. And how is a conference so poverty that they're doing Jefferson Pilot stuff in 2024 when they have their own network?
Stephen, that's exactly what I thought when I saw CW. I said it's going to be sandwiched in between a couple of Dawson's Creek episodes, reruns from 30 years ago.
It's like this week's Game of the Week on the CW is brought to you by Reverse Mortgages. I mean, it is completely poverty that this game is going to do that. I have no idea how a conference that has a relatively successful network of their own is doing the Lincoln Financial Jefferson Pilot thing as well. It blows my mind.
It's a throwback. They're trying to, all in the name of I guess spreading it around and giving the CW a little bit of love, I guess, but.
Well, can we get the 3 Daves at least? Maybe a little Rascal Flats at the beginning, going into it with the Bob That Head, something like that. If we're going to do 2008, let's do 2008. Yeah.
I like it. Yeah, it's good stuff, I guess, if you want to say, however you want to say it. Funny stuff. Sure.
Yeah, but the game's at 6:30 on the CW. I do not think it'd be a situation to where, it's regional or anything like that. So if you have a CW channel, you should have that as well. So everybody's going to get to see it. So I guess that is a good thing, but it still is ridiculous. Coming up at 7:00, Florida State tries to leave the ACC, and it's up to Wake Forest to save their city. Stuff like that. I mean, the jokes kind of write themselves. But you look at what's going on around Oxford. Right now, Chris Beard's a pretty happy camper because it looks like Malik Dia has pulled his name out of the NBA draft, and Matthew Murrell, being the biggest recruit in the short tenure of Chris Beard, coming back to Ole Miss. I think it was Jeff Goodman or one of those guys online on the Twitter machines said that Ole Miss is an NCAA tournament team for 2024-2025.
Well, there was my wife showed me something where they were ranked, maybe they sent an email, they were ranked 21 preseason by some ranking service, which just to see a ranking number beside Ole Miss, even a preseason somebody, is pretty cool. And I know that you even talked about it, I think, earlier, that they were saving possibly one spot for Matthew Murrell to decide if he wants to return. Well, guess what? Here he is. And so, I mean, if you're not excited about it, I'm not sure what rock you're living under, because this basketball team, because Beard now has the kind of players he wants. And, I think we have a chance to be even more special than we were this year. I think he did special things in year one, even though he didn't have quite exactly everything he wished he'd had, or I don't know, that may not be the right way to say it, but,
well, he brought, with Matthew Murrell coming back and Sean Padula and Dre Davis, you have 3 players that averaged over 15 points per game last year at the high major level. And I don't think that needs to be overstated. Like Sean Padula was in the ACC. You're playing against Duke, North Carolina, and those guys. That Virginia defense, you're playing against them. That means you can score. Mm-hmm. And Dre Davis at Seton Hall was able to put some stuff up together in the Big East. I don't want to say Power 5 or anything like that because Seton Hall was in the Big East. That's a high major basketball league. It's not a football league essentially at all. But this basketball team, you add in a Malik Dia, you add in the other bigs. Jamin Brakefield coming back. He's likely going to be a 6th or 7th man on next year's team. Chris Beard has quietly went about his business and put together a really good basketball team.
Well, he didn't want Lane Kiffin having all the Portal King fun. So he decided to have some himself. And but you got to score. I mean, and that was some of our frustration in the past.
Inside.
Yes.
The front court last year was a joke.
Yeah, we couldn't score when we had to. When we needed a bucket from 8 feet or in or 10 feet or in, we just couldn't do it. And it paid its dividends, and they could double people outside and make it hard for the outside shooters, the guards, to make shots. And at that point, we just couldn't score. And so this is exciting because, like you said, high-level basketball talent that has scored against high-level competition. So we should, if say Murrell gets cold, then Padula gets hot, or somebody else. I mean, it just, I don't know, it lends itself to doing a being better situation than we had last year for sure.
Thanks again for making the Locked On Ole Miss podcast your first listen. When we come back, Josh is going to give us his greatest Ole Miss football victories in history. So stick around for that. But right now, I do want to let you know that Gametime is the place to get your NBA Finals tickets. They have killer last-minute deals, all in prices, views from your seats, the lowest price guarantee. Gametime takes the guesswork out of buying NBA tickets. Lowest price guarantee, event cancellation, and job loss protection. They have some of the best customer service that you could ask for. Again, take the guesswork out of buying NBA tickets with Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONCOLLEGE for $20 off. Download Gametime today. Last minute tickets, lowest price guarantee. And it's winner take all time in the NBA and NHL, and FanDuel is giving you a shot to bring home a big win of your own. Right now, new customers can get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 bet. That's $150 to bet on spreads, money lines, player props, and more. Hey, the over-under for the Ole Miss season going into 2024 is 9.5. Is over-under your flavor of choice of sports betting? Maybe you want to bet of whether Ole Miss will make the playoffs itself. I think they're minus 122 or something like that right now. Or if you want to get real granular, Jackson Dart is plus 1,500 to win the Heisman Trophy. So check those out at FanDuel. Visit FanDuel.com/lockedon and make every playoff shot count. FanDuel, it's America's #1 sportsbook. Are you watching Fox Sports or ESPN on your TV all day? Have to turn down the volume with all of that screaming and shouting? Make the switch to Locked On Sports today. It's a free 24/7 sports streaming channel programmed for you every day to bring you the biggest stories without all of that screaming. Locked On Sports Today brings you can't miss analysis, news, opinions, and news, I guess, streaming 24/7 on YouTube or the free Amazon Fire TV channels app, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every single day. All right, Josh Guest is on the hot seat today. The question that we have, the top 5 greatest Ole Miss football wins, and the way this works, we count down 5, 4, 3, 2, 1 on this. I go the other way on mine, but the guests that come in go 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. We're going to start off, hopefully, with something kind of interesting. What is the number 5?
Well, Stephen, just to preface, this was kind of hard again. Obviously, you make hard lists on purpose, and I chose to go with things during my lifetime that I had seen, as opposed to there were some important wins, when we went undefeated and had to share the natty and all that kind of stuff. But I chose the 1999 Auburn game, 24-17, Corey Peterson in overtime as the first win on the Plains, I believe, in Auburn, as my number 5.
Okay. And that was really interesting. I do believe on that pass that Romero Miller threw to Corey Peterson. Romero got absolutely blown up on that play. It was like split seconds that they were able to do that, but they were able to get the win over Tommy Tuberville on the Plains. That was kind of a big deal. Number four,
I have the 2013 Andrew Ritter field goal, 27-24 over LSU a week after losing to A&M. I just thought that was a big win at home. We were there, and my daughter I don't know if it was at the time, maybe somebody had an Andrew Ritter jersey. It may have been her. I don't remember.
Also, that game almost had like 8 starters out. That was a game that like Chief Brown started at safety for Ole Miss, and one of his rare things. That was a big win. Over LSU, they had Zach Mettenberger, Odell Beckham, Jarvis Landry. LSU has talent. That's not a big thing to talk about, but that team was really good as well. Number 3.
I went with the 2014 23-17 win over Bama just because it was such a big deal. I know we ended up winning the next year. I kind of wanted to combo those together, the 2014 here and the 2015 at Tuscaloosa.
I did that Thursday, by the way. I put them together.
And so that was a big deal. It was a bigger deal in 2015, honestly, because we had just beat them the year before, and then we go to their house and win against Saban, which just never happens. Mm. And but that sort of announced Ole Miss football. It was a big win. It was exciting and that kind of thing. So I felt like it changed our trajectory a little bit, as did the 2012 Egg Bowl. That did not make my list. I spoiled the top 2 there, but it was close.
Number 2.
I'm going to go with 31-30, 2008 in Florida, at Florida. The big win there, and I think that was the famous Tebow speech afterwards, and they went on to do some mighty things after that. But that day they lost to the Rebels.
Yep, made Tebow cry. That's the famous game there. Number one,
this is probably more of a wait and see, but I'm going with the Peach Bowl victory, 38-25 over Penn State. It was bigger than that. The score was closer than the game was, but I think that victory led to where we are now, or helped lead to where we are now, and catapulted us into this offseason with the portal and that kind of thing. And the jury's still out. If we tank next year and don't make the playoffs and don't make a run, then maybe that's not number one anymore. But I just feel like for what it means right now, that was a huge win over a blue blood program. And it was dominating. It was not as close as the score showed. And I think it led to, the whole Poop Hall thing. And then from there, it just kind of snowballed.
Yeah. And you sit here in your honorable mentions and everything and talking about that, the LSU game last year. I say that LSU game, it's not on my top 5 list either, but it was probably the most fun game I've ever watched, but it probably wasn't the greatest win or anything like that. There's probably been a couple of those games, like the Arkansas game a couple of years ago, really exciting stuff. I think one game that nobody brings up, I think it was in 96 or 97. Ole Miss was down by like 25 points on the road to SMU, and they came back and won that game. Yeah, and
I left the stadium with 9 minutes and 22 seconds left. We heard a roar. We heard another roar before we got to the truck because it was at the old Cotton Bowl. We were on the fairgrounds, and we got in the vehicle, and we were at 40 miles outside of Dallas on the way back, listening to it on the radio when Ole Miss won. And we were so mad. We spent more time on the road than we did in Dallas for that game. But that was an amazing win and for the Rebels. And full disclosure, I watched one set of highlights this morning. It was last year's LSU victory. I was just sitting at the table doing some work this morning, and I pulled up YouTube for something, and that highlight reel was like in my little suggestions, and of course I watched it.
Yeah, that SMU game was the Pete Cordelli "You Gotta Believe" game. He kept saying that over and over, like I think it was Corey Peterson ran a punt back, and it was like, "Oh, you gotta believe," and he just kept saying it over and over and over again.
Stephen, in the second half, third quarter, there weren't very many people in the stadium at all, and we were all on the same side for the most part. And so the SMU fans were beside the Ole Miss fans, and at one point in the third quarter, there was almost a fight down below me. I was up probably midway up on that side, and probably 10 or 12 rows below me in a section to my right, some SMU fans and Ole Miss fans almost got into it, like big time. And so, it was me and 2 of my college buddies. We were in his Jimmy, and we left. And that same season, by the way, we went in his Jimmy to Arkansas, and we slept in the Jimmy between 2 Ole Miss RVs in the parking lot to go to the Arkansas game. So there's a little bit of history of traveling to see Ole Miss football.
Thanks again for making the Locked On Ole Miss podcast your first listen every day. We're free and available wherever you get your podcast, including YouTube. We're part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team, every single day. Josh Guest, thank you very much for coming on the show today. Pretty good top 5 list, man.
Appreciate it. Hotty toddy. Go Rebs.